Thank you, everybody, for staying for the program. And we've invited 4 farmers to practice their farming in different ways. And then we're going to have one of our own speak about theology. This is the intent of this is education for us to learn from these experts about their craft. And nobody's taking sides about anything. This is just for us to learn from them, and they can learn from each other as well. And Kathy Scheide is going to introduce our speakers.
Wow, it's almost over. I'm going to introduce Martha. McDowell is going to begin the evening with, I'm going to read what she wrote. I had written something very similar. The Reverend Martha McDowell is moderator of Park Center, Walhalla Presbyterian Church. She lives in Winnipeg and ministers to and with people who are political refugees from Central Africa. Martha and her sons are from Maine. She was a member of the Northern New England Presbytery for 15 years, and she's also a member of our Earth Care Committee. David Podall is from Lemoore, North Dakota. How convenient for me to have gotten him. And he goes to my church, so I'm lucky. David, with his wife Ginger, his brother Dan, and his wife Teresa are certified organic farmers in Dickey County, North Dakota. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Ann Carlson, who's here with 3 very well-behaved children, is from Mercer, North Dakota. Annie and her husband on their farm, Morning Joy Farm, raise and directly market animals in what she labels beyond organic. She also has a certified kitchen where she prepares value-added meals that she markets as well. Duane Hunter from the Grand Forks Presbyterian Church. Thank you, Caretakers, for finding Duane and convincing him to do this. Is from Gilby, North Dakota. Duane, his wife Rachel, and their 2 sons farm 850 acres of wheat and soybeans in Grand Forks County. They also have horses and operate a truck doing hopper, step deck, and van work. I'm not sure what step deck work is, but I'm going to find out maybe. And Ben Askegaard is from, and Ben is if you read your poster, you saw somebody by the name of John Jones was supposed to be here tonight. Ben, last minute, yesterday afternoon, agreed to do this spot tonight. And Ben is from Comstock, Minnesota. He grew up in Moorhead, and his dad and uncles have been carrying on the family farm that was started in 1890. This will be Ben's 3rd year farming 50 shares of sugar beets for Mindak Farmers Co-op in Wapaton, North Dakota. He helps on the family farm when he gets done with his full-time job at Peterson Farm Seed. He and his uncles and his dad raise corn, wheat, soybeans, and sugar beets in Cass, Richland, Clay, and Wilkin counties in Minnesota and North Dakota. Now, she's going to begin this thing, has about 10 to 12 minutes, and each of our panelists have 15 minutes, and there probably won't be much time for questions and answers from you folks, but if you have questions, they kind of agree to stick around and answer anything you might want to ask them. Okay? Have at it.
Good evening. I'm glad to be here. This is my first time talking with my new presbytery, so I'm nervous. I'm also in the middle of menopause, so while we're here, I want to the elements for the Lord's Supper. I want you to think about that today. Actually, every time. I don't want you to say grace just at meals. I want you to say grace when you go by those farms in Valhalla, where I am, that are sopping wet. And on Sundays, our farmers are saying, please, pray for the rain to go away. So rogation is happening now, and it's very, very important that we don't sit in our houses and say, dear God, make the rain go away. I got called to my second church, which is in Starks Lane. I'm sure you've all heard of it. It was the movement in Starks that started the law for 420. They wanted to make marijuana legal. That's how you know Starks. But when we moved there, it was way before that, and we got invited to one of our parishioners' houses, and I was commenting how great the meal was, and that I especially liked the chicken. And she said, oh good, because we had it killed for you. I grew up in the Army. I didn't know about farming. I mean, yeah, I saw cows and horses and stuff, but what do you mean they killed it for us? Because meat comes in those plastic things, right? That you don't have to touch. Well, one of the other farmers took me out into his fields, and I was blown away with how hard farming is. So I found this video, and I've asked Alicia to show it.
And on the 8th day, God looked down on his planned paradise and said, I need a caretaker. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to get up before dawn, milk cows, work all day in the fields, milk cows again, eat supper, then go to town and stay past midnight at a meeting of the school board. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody willing to sit up all night with a newborn colt and watch it die, and dry his eyes and say, maybe next year. I need somebody who can shape an axe handle from a persimmon sprout, shoe a horse with a hunk of car tire, who can make harness out of hay, wire, feed sacks, and shoe scraps, who planting time and harvest season will finish his 40-hour week by Tuesday noon, and then hanging from tractor back, put in another 72 hours. So God made a farmer. God said, I need somebody strong enough to clear trees and heave bales, yet gentle enough to yean lambs and wean pigs and tend the pink-combed puss, who will stop his mower for an hour to splint a broken leg of meadowlark. So God made a farmer. It had to be somebody who would plow deep and straight and not cut corners, somebody to seed, weed, feed, breed, and rake and disc and plow and plant and tie the fleece and strain the milk, somebody who would bail a family together with the soft, strong bonds of sharing, who would laugh and then sigh and then reply with smiling eyes when his son says that he wants to spend his life doing what Dad does. So God made a farmer.
He's right. And what I saw and what I've experienced since I've been in North Dakota is it can be a very lonely and difficult time to be a farmer. Am I right? A little bit? No? I'm wrong? So what I'm hoping is that we understand that everybody who works the land needs support. Everybody. Because they're not doing it just for themselves. They're doing it for all of us. So I want you to just quickly look at this, which you can look at it later, but for the Book of Confessions, our first catechism, whoever learned the shorter catechism, says that the first, we're going to catechism. Go to the first question, please. So the first question is, what is the chief aim of man? Who can remember? Did you guys? Right. Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy Him. That's the very first thing we learned in Sunday school. What rule had God given to direct us on how we may glorify and enjoy Him? contained in the scriptures in the Old and New Testament is the only rule to direct us on how we may glorify and enjoy him. So this is really important. We're going to the second one, Alicia. Is that in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis, God created out of the Adama, which is the earth, Adam. Or God created out of the humus a human. It wasn't that the human came first, folks. It's that the ground, the dirt, and the dust came first. And then we came. So we have a chief end to glorify God in all of this. And I have a list of books in case you want to read more about it. And I think I'm out of time. Right? 2 minutes. Okay. I'm trying hard. I am incredibly passionate about eco-justice. I'm incredibly passionate. My whole life is based that the church should lead society, not that society should tell the church what to do. If you fought with people about why they were Easter eggs and Easter bunnies, I refuse to ask that question. What we need to understand are the farmers in our lives are the ones who keep us alive. How are we going to support them? How is the church going to stand back and look and say, what can we do to help you? The chief end is that we say thank you. That's the only thing we've been asked to do, is to say to God, through the Holy Spirit, praise be to you, and thank you for your colors of creation. So let's hear how these folks have chosen to do farming.
Maybe I'll stand up so I can see what you're seeing too. Well, maybe I'll just stand here. After Martha's introduction that came to mind after listening to Paul Harvey's little thing is that not many people realize that the 20th century was the first time that all of the societies in the world were not agrarian societies. We live in an industrial world where there are few farmers, especially on this continent. And there are places in the United States when a person from the city is really thrilled to meet a farmer, and they never meet a farmer in their lifetime. So that's just a little perspective on that. There is my brother to the left, Brother Dan, and his wife Teresa, and me and Ginger, or Ginger and I. And our farm pictures to right there, you can kind of see where our two large gardens are. And in the background, that blue field is not flax, it's forage. And on the bottom is our mulch garden. We have a small farm by today's standards. We grow 4 main crops, triticale, hairy vetch, buckwheat, and millet, not the standard corn and soybeans. And we also raise vegetable seeds, a whole array of many things, and many of which we have bred and selected on our farm and in our garden over the years. We have a few chickens and tree belts you see there that go around the farm. There are some 60-odd species of trees and shrubs I've planted over the last 40 years. And the next slide was, I think there's buckwheat and a couple, and I think that's millet on the bottom there. And you find any weeds in there? I think what I've been doing over the last 40 years, I've learned something. I'm sure there's some weeds in there somewhere, and I don't mind weeds, and food there and a lot of biomass and a lot of carbon going back into the soil. I think, are there any more pictures? That's it. Okay, so I didn't know we were going to have any pictures tonight. So when I set out the farm 42 years ago, 42 years ago I spent a winter in study and prayer as a troubled soul, and the epiphany that came out of that was that I should farm organically. My dad was retiring and I was ready to take over the farm. And so I began in complete ignorance and complete faith in that venture. But I knew from my study that I wanted the farm to be very diverse. And long before we started talking about pollinators, I wanted to create a farm that the bees would love and all the livestock would love and or wildlife would love, and have livestock. And also, I will say that the garden is an integral part of our farm because it's the permanently mulched garden that we've had for 43 years is our teacher. It is where the soil is probably the richest anywhere on this planet. And so when I work in the garden, it's an intimate work, it's all hand work, it's the food that sustains us. And as such, too, I'm going to kind of ramble a little bit, but the garden is, like I said, it was integral, it's important to our farm. It produces our food. But it's also our sacred space. And it's sacred because it's the one place we don't want the money economy to interfere. So the seeds that we have produced from the garden, extra produce that we have from the garden are freely shared, and we don't let the money economy intrude upon that. So it's at least one little thing where we can set aside on our farm a sacred area where the root of all evil cannot be. So then, I'm starting this thing called organic farming, and I'm sure it's a great thing to do, and I know there's going to be a learning curve, but it turned out to be probably worse than I thought, and you know how all that stuff goes when you do something you're totally ignorant of. But I grew up on the farm. The farm that I'm farming now, I grew up on, and so I knew the land, and been riding tractor and doing a lot of things, and it was, I have to say that one of my greatest desires for humankind is for every kid to be able to grow up on a farm. I think it, for me especially personally, I don't know where there'd be some homeless bum in the big city somewhere if I had grown up on a farm and had the upbringing that I had. And I was mentioning to Sylvia earlier at supper that I grew up in a little Cottonwood Presbyterian church, a little country church about 3 miles from our farm. It was 100% farmers in the congregation. And my Sunday school teachers were my neighbors that we worked with and we celebrated holidays with and we played with, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful community. I can't imagine how it couldn't be a positive experience for any kid. And so that's one of the reasons why that we have not expanded the size of our farm. That was purposeful. Over the last 40 years, we have not expanded the size of our farm. We decided to farm with our intelligence rather than just, go out there and do whatever we needed to do to, fit with the economy. So we tried to make an economy we tried it, whatever little thing we do, even though we knew we couldn't change the larger world, it was just our little part. farming is the right livelihood, doing simple, humble work, living lightly on the earth, and how to be, as the Mennonites put it, the quiet in the land. And I know there's an awful lot of farmers that are introverts, and so I can imagine, we're the quiet in the land. So we talked and discussed a lot of those things, and so then we had to, okay, so what are the practical things that we needed to do? So we decided that, how would we judge our individual farming practices? We questioned anything we do on the farm. Will it cause erosion? Will it cause the loss of humus? Will it promote inherent fertility? Will it pollute the groundwater or the atmosphere? Will it result in healthy food and feed for humans and livestock? Are we postponing any costs to the next generation? Am I trying to farm more acres than I can seed? Some of you may be familiar with Wendell Berry. He promoted the eyes to acres ratio. We should be careful about not farming more acres than our eyes can actually steward. And so we've tried to take that to heart. How much energy will it take to do what I'm doing? How can I design a system to use less energy? Will it promote diversity and fecundity and inherent fertility? And do I understand what land is? And so I've learned from a lot of people over the years. I've got a list here of things that have been particularly influential in my thought. A little booklet, Strangers and Guests, put out by the Catholic Church years ago, and the Presbyterian Church actually has one like that too, that talks about land stewardship. I was going to bring it to see if anybody was familiar with it. A book called Trees, Why Do You Wait? This guy, who was the author of Trees, Why Do You Wait? I got a list of books here, and I don't have their authors in front of me. Richard Critchfield. And his thesis was that unless a society maintained a certain significant percentage of its people as farmers, that society was doomed to fail. Then a book called Reclaiming America. There's a book out on the table. Richard Cartwright Austin, who was a big city preacher, gave up that, went out to live on a small farm in West Virginia and do itinerant preaching, and he developed his thesis that I don't know my brain here. I'm sorry. And Food for Tomorrow, Dean Freudenberger, The Gift of Good Land, Wendell Berry, Sand County Almanac, The Good Earth, Giants in the Earth, Grapes of Wrath, Bones of Plenty, Farmers of 40 Centuries. Farmers of 40 Centuries was one of the first books I read that winter, and it taught me, yes indeed, there are farmers in the world that have farmed the same land for 4,000 years without degrading it whatsoever. And then of course, the Bible as a text. There's a lot of good things for farmers in the Old Testament. Of course, all societies were agrarian, and even though, much of what, Paul was an urban, St. Paul was an urban boy, and that's a whole other story. I could tell about my thoughts about Paul, but, Jesus used primarily agricultural metaphors, and he was talking to landless peasants. They were the ones that came with the palm branches on what we call Palm Sunday and heralded his entry into Jerusalem. It was, the land had consolidated into fewer and fewer hands by the time Jesus was in Palestine, and he came to declare the Jubilee, the year of our Lord. peasants understood that. And to them, that meant they would get land back. And so I learned some things from the Old Testament. The land is a gift. And from Psalms it says the world and all that is in it belongs to the Lord. And so I try to remember this. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day, everything that's going on with farming as a business, but it's a gift from God. All that we have is a gift from God. And I'm reading from a presentation that I gave many years ago. And at that time, it was before, well, we could patent plants, but it wasn't a big thing. But our seed that we raise on our farm, is free for anybody to use. What we have developed, what we have bred, is free for anybody to use for breeding and planting and saving their own seed. The genetics that make up our crop, they're a gift from God. And can we own that? I mean, God tells us that we're not even to own the land, that we are just strangers and guests on the land. I know that you are strangers and guests, God said. You take care of it for me. And so, as it is with everything. In Deuteronomy it says, you will bless your fields so that you will have grain, wine, and olive oil. And Micah says, everyone will live in peace among his own vineyards and fig trees, and no one will make him afraid. So as a farmer, the picture that God paints in talking to the people in the Old Testament, that one that is particularly caught my brain and stayed in it, was that everyone should be able to sit under his own fig tree, eat freely of its fruit, and have to pay none in rent, have enough for our needs, have no debt. You know, it's the picture of joy, contentment, community, and justice in the land. The land is also temptation. I mean, this is why God created the Jubilee. We want to have more always. And so that's one of the reasons why we just said on our farm we would not participate in, expanding the farm. In Isaiah, he says, woe unto you who buy more houses and fields to add to those you already have. Soon there will be no place for anyone else to live, and you alone will dwell on the land. It's not a very good picture, is it? The land is for everyone and everyone's needs. And, here I have it. Richard Cartwright Austin in Reclaiming America. He believes that there should be a constitutional right for a human to have access to land. At least have enough land to grow some of his food, have some intimate relationship with the earth. Indeed, he says, even to be fully human, we must live in communion with God and nature. So unless we have some of that intimacy with the land, we can't be fully human. So what kind of a challenge is that for an urban society like ours? The land is task. When you come into this land, it says in Leviticus, when you come into this land of great abundance, as you begin to establish your community in that promised place, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. And so, of course, we have trouble with keeping a Sabbath to the Lord, because, every Sabbath year, you're supposed to, am I running out of time? Okay. So I will go to the last thing, and the land is threat. There is a payment for not obeying God's call for justice, and the translation that I like the best, it's the most vivid, is that God warns us to be just in the land so the land may not vomit you out. basis. And let me talk to you later if you like.
Hey, there we are. My name is Carlson. I'm from Mercer, North Dakota, which is 50 miles straight north of Bismarck. In my wild single days, I lived in Wilton, and I went to the Wilton Presbyterian Church, which is right across the street from my house, so the commute was short. That's us. That's me, the garlic skate queen, on the left. And then that's our family in the middle. A few years ago, I was the 2015 Country Woman of the Year, and that's where they took that lovely family photo of us. It's the only photo that we have that's like professional, because usually I'm taking them. And then the one on the right is at a Halloween event up at the Audubon Wildlife Refuge. And then, oh, there's me. Oh, yes. That's our kitchen on the left. So we built a commercial kitchen on our farm in 2014. My dad had built a 40 by 40 heated shop back in the 70s, and so we, in essence, just built a box in the shop because it already had power and water. And so we just built a box, and now we have a certified commercial kitchen that we value at our farm products, do catering, other fun stuff. And then on the right, that's my fourth child. That's Kierlik, the one-horned wonder. The one-horned wonder. I won her on a silent auction at the Moses Organic Farming Conference. And I technically won a fetus because she wasn't even born yet. So we won pick up the heifer crop at a 100% grass-fed organic dairy down by the cities, Minnesota, and which actually no longer exists. And so her name is Kierlik, which means love. She has a big heart on her forehead. And she is 5 now and has given us calves, and so that's the start of my herd, is my fourth child, Kierlik. And so she's always up for a good selfie. A farmer selfie is called a selfie, so she's always up for a good selfie. I have quite a few of Kierlik, the one-horned wonder, myself. And so John and I farm together. We're co-laborers on the land. We currently live on my family's land. The kids are the 4th generation on our farm. We didn't start out there. We got married in 2007, and 6 weeks after we got married, we were pregnant with Jana, and so it was game on. Figure your stay-at-home mom job. And so John had a quarter of land in Stutsman County. We lived south of a little town called Cleveland. And he had a quarter of land and a house. We lived on the farm. And we knew we couldn't compete in Stutsman County. He was raised on a conventional farm. I was raised on a conventional farm. I was the oldest of 3 kids, and when I was 11, my dad, we lost our hired man, and Mom said, "What are you going to do, Bill?" And Dad said, "Well, Annie can farm with me." So I was farming from the time I was 11. I would go to the store, the farm store, and I would say I need 20 railroad ties because we were rebuilding some corral fence. And they would say, "Well, we'll get a couple guys to help you load them." And I'd say, "Well, can I just go back and load them up? Like, they're not going to go back from lunch for another 45 minutes. "Well, no, you can't do that." And I looked at him and I said, "Who do you think is going to unload them when I get home?" So I've always farmed. I've always been a part of the farm. I got after my mom a few years ago because I was still harboring some bitterness toward her. Because I would farm all day with Dad, and then I'd come in at 10 o'clock at night, my food would be there, and I'd mark it up in the microwave. And then my mom would say, "Well, Annie, it's your turn to wash dishes." Skip never had to wash dishes, my brother. Coley never had to work in the field. So I've let it go. The Lord has cleansed my bitterness. And so, like, I grew up on both sides, and I loved it. And so coming back to the farm was never an option. My dad said, "I'm not making any money. In fact, we're probably going to lose this farm." And he actually had to retire for medical reasons. He had cancer. All the land went into CRP, and we basically all left the farm. And so I always wanted to. It was always in my blood. I became a science teacher, and so I loved the sciences. I love biology and geology. And so I became a science teacher and went my separate ways. And then I married a farmer, and then we looked at each other and we said, "Oh, we know this. Let's do this." And so I was pregnant with Jana that first winter, and I just gestated and Googled small farm profitability. How can we make this quarter of land keep me at home raising our kids? And so I came across the concept of CSA, community supported agriculture, and I thought, I can do this. Like, I've gardened my whole life. In the summer times when I was teaching, my summer job was I'd work for a gardener, and And so I Googled him, because that's how we get our start, right? So I Googled him, and I found that he wrote books, and I read books. And so I told Joel, we were a match made in heaven. And so I ordered 2 books of his, Pasture, Poultry, Profits, and You Can Farm. And I ordered them. You Can Farm is 486 pages. I read it almost every year. It's dog-eared and stained and marked and posted it up. And John read Pasture, Poultry, Profits. We would run them both in a weekend. And we looked at each other and we said, we can do this. We already had our start with the CSA. And so John started with Pasture Poultry, with turkeys and laying hens and broilers. And then we brought in pasture pork, because our customers were asking us where they could find good pork, and we couldn't tell them. And so we thought, well, if we can't find it, we should provide it. And then we got some sheep, and we raised grass-fed lamb, and then I won here with the one-horn wonder. And so now we have, I have 2 bull calves, so technically I'm in the beef business. And so we have, more grass-fed animals on the farm. The winter of 10 and 11, and the next winter, were really hard. We had a ton of snow. Our road flooded 2 out of 3 years. And John said, in anger, we should just move. And I chalked it up to being stressed. And then he said it again. And I said, wait a minute. Are you stressed or are you serious? I'm serious. You should look for property. And so I did, and we couldn't find anything that we wanted. And so I said, well, if we're going to move somewhere, let's move somewhere that means something to us. And so my parents by then had retired, fully. Mom had retired from teaching, and so they were spending 6 months on the farm in North Dakota and 6 months down in Tennessee with my brother. And so we called them in Tennessee and we said, hey, we're looking to move. Are you interested in selling the farm? Think about it, pray about it, talk about it, take all the time you need. They called back in an hour. And they said, nothing would make us prouder than for the 2 of you to take over the farm. And so that's how we moved to Mercer, and I came back home. And so we bought the farm, and raising our kids on it, and doing stuff very different from the way Dad and I used to farm. Right now we raise grass-fed lamb, and I have 1 ewe left to lamb, and she's holding out. I think she's just crossing her legs on me. So I've got 1 ewe left to lamb, and we're lambing on pasture. And so I grew up with sheep. We lambed in jugs. Anybody raised sheep? You had lambing jugs, 4x4 pens, and then you carried water and food to them, and then you carried away a bunch of soiled hay, and it was just this never-ending cycle of caring for these sheep. And so, I've spent 36 straight hours in the lambing barn, and I'll never do it again. And so John and I just always look for ways to back off, I guess is the right word. How can we imitate nature more exactly? And so, one of the most powerful things that we learned towards the beginning of our journey was from David right here, is the power of observation. That's the farmer's greatest tool, is their power of observation. And so John and I spend a lot of time simply observing. We'll go out and watch our sheep and cows, and our sheep and cows graze together. It's called a flirt, flock and herd, flirt. If you Google flirt, our farm comes up. We didn't invent that term, Greg Judy from Missouri did, but we totally borrowed it. And so we go out and watch the flirt, and the reason we graze the flirt together is because sheep and cows graze very differently. And so we want that impact on the landscape. We also rotationally graze, so we want them eating and moving on. And so most of what we graze is expired CRP, and there's some thistle problems in there. And so John called one of our grazing mentors, and he said, what do I do with this thistle? Should I clip? What should I do with it? Dig it out? What can I do here? And our grazing mentor said, well, are they eating it? John's like, oh yeah, they stripped the leaves out, all that's left is the woody stalk. And our grazing mentor said, well, then you've successfully found a way to market Canadian thistle. So sometimes it takes talking to someone else for them to say, you don't have a problem here, when you're freaking out about the problem. And so John and I just always want to take a step back, always ask why. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Why are we putting lambs and ewes in jugs when they can lamb out on pasture? And what research from the University of Wisconsin is showing is that as you confine a ewe and her lambs, her mothering instinct goes down. So what we're seeing on the pasture, we don't have abandoned lambs. They're all claimed. And when I was raising sheep in the barn conventionally, we had 33 bottle lambs. We've been raising sheep for 6 years on a pasture-based system. We've had 2 bottle lambs in 6 years. And so, how can we just keep stepping back? And so John and I owe our marriage to two things. The fact that we're still married. The 5 love languages and knowing what each other's are. We have exactly the opposite love languages. And the second one is holistic management. And so in holistic management, the question is always why? 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 And we just keep questioning that and backing up farther and farther. We always want to be doing something different on our farm. We always want to be changing things up. This year, John's going to do some pasture cropping. So right now, the flirt is doing some heavy grazing, and they're really just hitting this part of our pasture harder than we would normally graze them. And then John's going to direct seed into that thatch, some grain crops, and see what we can do with that. We're always experimenting. John and I are debt-free, and that gives us a lot of freedom, because I don't have to convince a banker of my crazy ideas, right? I can just say to John, well, we have $500 for this. Yes, we do. So we go and be crazy. We're the lunatics in our community. When we first moved there, the land was still in CRP, so we were grazing around the 19-acre farmstead with everybody. John called it organized chaos. And so we had turkeys and broilers and hens and pigs and sheep, and everybody was moving around. And so at one point during the summer, everybody was up kind of towards the road, and then you could see them as we drove past. And so we live in a coulee, and you come over the hill, and you drive past our place, and you go up another hill. I was going to start putting in a toll booth. People were driving by, and they'd slow way down. And I was going to charge them for that. If you drop below 20 miles an hour, I'm charging you for this. And then the word on the street in Turtle Lake was that Carlsons are running a petting zoo. So apparently, if you have more than one species of livestock, it's a petting zoo. So it isn't. I would say a hobby farm is one that you don't make money on, so it doesn't matter how big your farm is. It's not my hobby, it's my job. And so we direct market a ton of our stuff. Just kind of started in some restaurants and wholesale stuff, but mostly it's direct marketing. Working directly with customers. Some of our customers want to come out and see the animals. Some of them say, I don't want to see that fuzzy lamb. I want to remind you of that when I eat a lamb chop, which is fine. Some of them want to see us butcher chickens, and they want to help. And we always have people out visiting the farm and seeing, what we do. David's right when he says the urban population really has no clue what's going on the farm. I send out a CSA newsletter every time we get our vegetable CSA. Every week they got a newsletter with a photo of this is what's happening on the farm. And one week it was a picture of the potato patch, and it was just covered in purple blossom. It was just beautiful. And I said, this is your potatoes. And in a week or two, when flowers drop off, there'll be new little potatoes in your CSA shed. And one of our customers emailed back and said, I didn't know potatoes had a plant part. And then I thought about that. If your only experience with a potato is in a bag at the grocery store, it's not like a carrot, right? They don't sell them with the tops on. So how would a general consumer know that? They really wouldn't. It needed a connection to me, the grower of said potato, to say this is what it actually looks like. And then for the first time, our customers care about the weather. We would get storm warnings in Sutton County, thunder, hail, whatever, take shelter. My email inbox would light up as soon as the storm had passed. Did you get hail? How much rain did you get? Are the cucumbers okay? Because suddenly the weather impacted them, right? If we got a bunch of hail, they got no salad greens because it got ripped to shreds. And if it hailed on the cucumber blossoms, they weren't getting the cucumbers. So suddenly they cared. Suddenly they were invested. And so that's what we are trying to do on our farm. Connect people to their food, connect people to where it comes from. Our farm has 3 basic tenets. The first one is that our family stays together. So we want to farm in a way that our kids can help us, that our kids can be a part of it, that they can be involved, that we don't have to say, stay away because you can't be near this part. Secondly, we want to have a fair price, both for us and for our customers. And so I've been told by more than a few people, you should charge $25 a bird for your broilers. You could get it. Well, technically, I suppose I could, but that isn't fair to my customers, right? Just because some people would pay it doesn't mean I should charge everybody for that. And so John and I work really hard to keep track of our costs. And so we can give a really accurate price to our customers. Right now our price for broilers is $12 a bird. And so, yeah, that's more than you get in the grocery store, but that's what John and I need to continue to raise this food for you. And we open that freely to our customers. They know exactly what we're talking about. If we have to raise the price, we tell them exactly why we have to raise the price. And they understand that because they know that that's one of John and I's important parts. And the last one, the third one, is that we'll build community. And so that includes our rural community of Turley and Mercer. That includes the community of the ecosystem that we are a part of. We want to regenerate that landscape. I've been a part of the landscape when we were hard on it. We have a native pasture that right now we're running our chicken tractors across, that for the first 20 years of my life was grazed down to nothing every single summer continuously. And then we went into the CRP program, and then what do we do with it? We let her sit. So we went to the two extremes of abuse, right? Heavy use and complete rest. And so now we're trying to find that sweet spot in the middle where a productive landscape, sometimes they use the term working landscape, and so we want that landscape to generate income, but we also want to heal it and massage it and bring it back. And so what we're seeing now in that landscape, 3 years of running chicken tractors across it, moving our boilers every single day deposits the equivalent of 300 pounds of nitrogen. And so what we're doing is just boosting that native prairie. And the diversity that we're seeing in the vegetation, the diversity in the songbirds that we've seen in the 5 years that we've been back, has really been amazing to see. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Kathy tells me afterwards, and she's giving me the... So it's great to be with you, and thank you for being willing to listen to all of us and to hear what we do and how we do it. The thing about farming, Wendell Berry, another one favorite of David's of mine, he said in The Unsettling of America, when did it become better to have the neighbor's land than it did to have the neighbor? And my parents are both gone. They died within a year and a half of each other. And at both of their funerals, people came up to me and asked if I was going to sell the land. When did it become better to have the neighbor's land than it did to have the neighbor? And that is a crisis that rural America has faced and will continue to face. How can we get more people on the landscape? Right now, farmers are 0.7% of the population. There are more people in prison than there are farming the land. And if that fact doesn't scare you, I don't think anything will. So, I'm turning it over to Duane.
Well, the first picture up there is my two boys sitting on a truck stand. We just have one truck, 100 Sons Transport. When I called down to Dixon's Insurance here in Fargo, when I set up the insurance for the LLC, he asked me, he said, how many drivers do you have? How old are your sons? And I said, 16 months old and born Sunday morning. And we waited for Owen to come to form the LLC so we wouldn't have to renew the paperwork from son to sons. And I'll be 71 years old when I can ride in the passenger seat. The next picture is my wife Rachel. I took it the other day with our broodmare Pecuniary. She's a 17-year-old thoroughbred. She should foal here in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be only her second foal. She would probably be our last baby for a while, if ever. North Dakota is not a practical place to deal much with horses, and with weather changes we've had the last several years, it's been much more so. But we've got this one coming, and we look forward to it. The last picture of the two boys in the wheat field 2 years ago, I think it was. And that's my reward, that picture. I've had it reproduced in several forms. And that particular year, that was about the only place that we could take a picture where the wheat looked like that. But I love it. Farming for me is, I'm a farmer, that's what I've done. This year will be my 39th crop, my 44th harvest. I suppose in some respects I'm the third generation on the farm we live on. I never knew my grandfather. My father died when I was young. Neighbors kind of raised me, helped me get started. So in some respects I'm the first. I've got these boys, and I don't know, quite frankly, that I want them to farm. Truck meeting. For several years I custom harvested. I prefer to see them harvest their men as farmers. Over the 40 years that I've done this, there's been a lot of good years. It hasn't been all bad by any means. But 1993 on July 25th, we picked up 6 inches of rain. We've never had that much at any one time. And it's been pretty much, that's been the theme of it the last 20 plus years. And I've seen a lot of guys that have left, a lot of changes. The last few years have become extremely difficult. When you listen to the weatherman talk about rain north of the Highway 2 corridor, that's us. And, when we talk about the years that we've had, 2000 was the flood year. We had 12 inches overnight, middle of June, pretty much took everything. 2001 was the hail year. We thrashed 60 acres a week before the entire rest of the crop was taken. The sad part is 2001 was the best year of farming I ever had. We had plenty of insurance. I was custom harvesting in those days, so I could go on and I didn't have to thrash any of my own, so that's what we did the rest of the fall. It worked out all right. 2004, we raised corn for the first time. It froze in August. That was the first year Rachel was here. She's not from around here. She mowed all 200 acres with 2 rolls at a time with a 3-point mower and our 4320. She didn't want to have corn again the next year. And there have been good years through that, and we got married and we had the boys. 2013, it was wet. We got half the crop in. That year we bought our first track tractor. In 14, we bought the second one, and we got all the crop in that year. And that's been the theme of it. I mean, you look at me and my neighbors and how we've equipped ourselves in this past year especially. We had 30 plus inches of rain from the end of May to the 1st of October, and tracks and mechanical fronts and tracks on the combines, and it's I wish I could sit here and talk about, well, we grow this and we do this and so forth. And for us, to a certain extent, it's become about survival. And this past harvest was one of my most proudest because we got everything off. We had put tools on the combine. We got everything off. We didn't rough the fields up. We got stuck one time. We got all the groundwork before freeze up. And that was the accomplishments. Right now, we're looking at putting in a crop. And we don't know if we're going to spread the wheat, if we're going to put it in with a drill, if we're even going to get out there, depending on what the weather does. And the groundwater is right to the top. And it's just the way it is. And you ask yourself sometimes, and what I was told part of this is you talk about how your faith affects how you farm or so forth. When I look at my years of farming, probably early on, I know back in the 80s, we prayed for rain. And sometimes we got it, we had a good crop, sometimes we didn't. And over the years, I've more or less quit praying for results. We need this, we need that, whatever, and praying simply for the ability to cope with what comes and to deal with it. mention hail, but he worked it to where, give us what we need, and he emailed it to me, and I took my iPad and I went out to the middle of the home section, and I got on my knees and I read his prayer, and we didn't get hail. But I tried. This past Tuesday, my wife and I signed paperwork to sell one of the 4 quarters of land that we got. This wasn't a family quarter, it's one we bought when we got married. And this is how we're going to farm in 2017, and beyond that, we don't know. So, it'll depend on this year. We're going to farm 850 acres. Last year we farmed 1,250. We've let some stuff go. We were hoping to get to 700 acres to reduce our exposure to loss and for me to be able to spend more time in the truck. But in the economy that we're in, even getting out of it is hard now. We missed the boat a few years ago. But it's like I remember with the horses years ago. If you come out of the horse show arena with a blue ribbon on the horse, everybody wants to buy it. But you just got the blue ribbon, you don't want to sell it. So it's not until the horse now is not doing so good. Boy, I'd like to have that sale now. Well, then nobody wants it at that point. So, and it's kind of the same way with the farming. I think about over the years, if I had been sitting here at something similar to this, the story would have been different, almost every year, every few years. This is where we're at now. I look at my boys, and for me, I look back to, the 20, 30 years that things were pretty good and that, and then I get these kids, and now, it's kind of falling apart, and it doesn't make any sense to a certain extent. But I tell myself sometimes maybe we're just being sent down a different road, and they're meant to do something else. My goal right now is to raise them on a farm if I can, because I think that would be good for them. Beyond that, I don't know. And there's so many things we don't have control over. It's very typical when a farmer has a son that, you got somebody to take the farm over. When Jake was born, the oldest, I was excited. I didn't think too much about what this baby might be. And when Owen was born, when I carried him from the operating room to where I call process somebody. Measure the hand, wave, and so forth. And they carried him, I looked down at him and I said, Marine Corps General. And I've already started making inquiries. A friend of mine worked for Senator Holm, and I said, what do we have to do to get him into Annapolis? But, that's kind of what it's become for us. And crop-wise, we're going to raise wheat and soybeans this year. Corn would work. We don't farm enough acres to justify to be able to have an infrastructure that takes. And it takes different equipment, and it's a lot more bushels to handle and so forth. Over the years, we've raised edible beans, barley, sunflower, pretty much anything you can name. I never raised sugar beets or potatoes, but we used to rent ground out for that. The weather has changed what we can do. Edible beans, there's guys that grew them last year that they burned. We're running out of insurance. It doesn't work with the wet weather. And things shifted. My dad farmed, he grew flax. There was a lot more flax grown. Things change. You have to be adaptable to that. And, that's about all I have to say about it. I thank you for
to be here and for listening. Thank you.
Well, my name is Askegaard. The picture up there on the left is a picture taken from an airplane, obviously. The bottom part of that picture is a big white thing, big white box. That's where our farm is. Our actual farm, when we settled in 1890, was up in the kind of the north part, anyway, there's a couple bins up on the north part of that picture there. That's where our farm started. It was actually a bonanza farm, so we had over 100 horses at one time. So yeah, that's pretty much where my family came from. The middle picture is my second beet crop. It was probably our best. Quality-wise, it wasn't our best, but tonnage-wise, it was leaps and bounds over anything we've ever raised before. The picture on the right is a picture of our barn that still stands. It's now red. It doesn't have Askegaard Farm since 1890 on there anymore. Picture is of my dad on the left, my sister in the middle, and me on the right. My mom would have been there, but she had passed away in 2004 of breast cancer. She had battled for 12 years. So, and it's one of those things, sugar beets got us through a lot of the angst and issues with dealing with cancer for 12 years. So, if it wasn't for my mom's job, we would have been bankrupt a long time ago with our health insurance. But like I said, this is going to be, I got my third crop in the ground already. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because the forecast doesn't look very pleasant. But it's one of those things you do. You have faith. You have, it has to get better. The weather always has to be better. But 90% of what we do is in control of Mother Nature. 90%. 10% we can all do. And we work hard at it. You just listen to 3 people talk about, literally blood, sweat, and tears. They're working their tails off. But my dad and his 2 brothers, Tom and Andrew, my dad Ed. My dad started in 76. And as he was going to school at Washington Science, met my mom in high school. And my grandpa called my dad and said, I need help on the farm. So my dad went to the farm and helped. At that time, I think it was 86, is when they needed to adapt. How do you adapt? It's either you go under or you figure out something to do. That's when we got the sugar beets, 1986. All of our neighbors were in beets. We had cattle, we got rid of the cattle, and we got the sugar beets. It's all about adapting, and it's not an easy deal. Like right now, the prices of the commodity isn't promising at all. It's doom and gloom. It's not as bad as it sounds, but guess what? Every farmer gets up in the morning, figures out what he has to do to put a meal on the table. But like on our farm right now, we farm corn, wheat, soybeans, and sugar beets. We only have enough wheat for our beets for rotation. It's the number one thing that we pride ourselves in raising a good quality sugar beet crop. Especially when you have specialty crops, you have to figure out a way to make that work and make it work for the best of everybody. As my dad said a couple weeks ago, I'd never heard this come out of his mouth before. You might have to get out of sugar beets. This doesn't work this year. We're seriously thinking about getting out of it because it's been our bread and butter the last umpteen years, but right now we got to figure out how to survive because we got it's my dad and his 2 brothers, and so there's 3 families involved. So in the River Valley, there's farmers are the own worst enemies when it comes to figuring out who's going to rent land. And I told my dad, we had an opportunity to rent some more land. I said, where's it at? How much do they want for it? I just said, where is it at? And I said, no, because I knew it was going to be way too much. And it was. And somebody else picked it up. But it seems like I'm rambling a lot, but there's a lot of emotion involved in the everyday business aspects of this farming. Personally, I'm an agronomist by nature, by trade, so I help farmers raise a better crop. That's my goal at the end of the day. I do crop budgets, help farmers do crop budgets to figure out how they can adapt better. How do we minimize costs? And how do we be innovative in the aspect of what can we do differently? You know, listening to you speak about, you know, everybody thinks you're crazy for doing what you're doing. It's like, well, it's working. So why not do something? One of the books that I am very fond of, and she was talking about why. Keep questioning yourself. Why are you doing this? A guy named Simon Sinek, I don't know if you ever heard of him. It's a book called It Starts With Why. And one of the things that sticks out in my head, I have it on the wall in my office, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. It's the passion that you instill in people, and the passion that you instill in yourself to show what you love to do. It's not work. If I woke up every morning saying I had to go to work, I don't know if I'd do it. But I know at the end of my day, I can go home to the farm and hop and get into the shop or get into a tractor, and it's my release. It's one of those things, I get rid of all my stress. Just one of the things my mom said before she passed on, she goes, Ben, why do you want to farm? Watching your dad struggle, pound nails all winter long, in the spring you go to the farm. Pound nails all winter long, blow the whistle, referee basketball all winter long, traveling umpteen miles. It's just what I want to do. I grew up in a 700 versatile on a bucket with my grandpa. Anybody knows what a 700 versatile is? It's not quiet. But I could fall asleep in that thing any day of the week. So I guess the biggest thing, I mean, agriculture and farming is a passion of mine. And my grandma always said, we can work on Sunday, but you have to go to church first. That's what we did. Because the good Lord giveth and the good Lord taketh away. And if we didn't show that we cared, it's just one of those things. You just gotta strive to give back instead of take. And I should have put a picture of my sweet corn patch I give away every year. Do about an acre of sweet corn, and it's right behind the church in Comstock where our farm is. And I can give all the sweet corn away, but I have to pick it. I'm like, this doesn't seem right. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can answer questions later on. I didn't know I did a lot of rambling, but I really didn't come with a script of what I was going to say. It's more of my gut and how I was going to tell my story. So, thank you.
Can you hear me? Good. So, I hope you heard in all of this that we are called to lead, not to follow what society says. So our job to lead here tonight